I'm going to compare Smurfs the Lost Village to the Garfield movie. Now, I have not actually seen Smurfs the Lost Village. I've seen the Smurfs movie, as in the first one of these from Sony Pictures Animation. I mean, yeah, it was totally fine, but a forgettable movie, to be honest. Not one that I really would ever want to rewatch. Not one that's too interesting. It's like, okay, yeah, it's fairly normal kiddie stuff. Sony Pictures Animation has definitely had ups and downs as a studio. I mean, they're both the studio that did Mitchell's versus the Machines, top tier, fantastic animated movie. And they did something like Smurfs, which is a lot more kiddie, whereas Mitchell's versus the Machines works for both kids and adults. Plus, the Smurfs movies aren't that good. Now, when it comes to Garfield, I actually have seen 5 seasons of the TV show Garfield and Friends. I've looked at, the Garfield comic strips before. I actually saw the Garfield movie in theaters, and while it was a totally harmless, inoffensive movie, it's not like I watched it and thought, oh, this is terrible. What a disaster. What a misfire. No, I didn't think anything like that, but it's not a great movie. Not one that I would really ever want to rewatch. The biggest problem with the Garfield movie, to be honest, is that it totally misses all the things that are distinct about Garfield. If you think about it, Garfield is inherently a pretty simple concept. I mean, this goes back to the Garfield comic strips where you have 3 or 4 panels and then a punchline. Some pretty simple setup about a lazy cat that likes to sleep or eat lasagna, eat food in general, but lasagna is his favorite. Then, even when you look at the TV show Garfield and Friends, it was composed of all these different segments where if you go on Peacock, you'll see all these different episodes of Garfield and Friends, but each episode is 3 different segments. You would have 2 segments about Garfield, John Arbuckle, Odie. You'd have a few quickies in there that were just a minute long. And also these segments about farm animals. It's pretty simple, straightforward stuff. You had just 6 minute segments or minute long quickies. So just really straight to the point, simple kind of stuff. So the problem when you get to the Garfield movie is that in order to stretch it out into a movie, you just make it more bland and generic. So suddenly Garfield is going on this spy adventure, this heist adventure. In fact, the movie actually calls out Mission Impossible. So the filmmakers know that they're taking inspiration from Mission Impossible. Plus, you've Garfield dealing with daddy issues and abandonment issues. It's like, this is not what I want from Garfield. And I think, to be honest, inherently, it's hard to make a good Garfield movie because, as I just talked about, fundamentally, Garfield is a very simple, straightforward concept. So it's hard to make a movie out of that when the concept doesn't really lend itself to an extended story, to be honest. I think Garfield is one of these things that just works better when you're talking about 6 minute segments, a minute long quickie comic strips where it's just 3 4 panels and a punchline, something along those lines. I mean, I also actually within the past 2 years did watch the live action Garfield movie with Bill Murray, and I mean, compared to the animated Garfield movie, sure, it's a bit closer to what I would want from Garfield, but still definitely not great by any means. So, I mean, if I had to choose between Smurfs and the Garfield movie, that's a hard decision. I mean, I guess I'll choose the Garfield movie just because, I have a bit more of an emotional connection to Garfield just because I've seen 5 seasons of Garfield and Friends. But I don't think Smurfs or the Garfield movie are great. Both of them are not all that good, to be honest. So it's just a question which one is slightly not as bad as the other one. Which movie do I have a greater emotional connection to? That'll wrap things up for this one.